Today we have our two primals. This is the rib loin, which can be broken down into three different different groups. We have, you can leave it whole as a whole rib loin roast. You cut it in half, make it a little bit smaller of a roast, or we can come in and cut steaks and make some ribeyes. We can do boneless ribeyes, or we can do bone-in ribeyes. Here we have the chuck primal, which you can make chuck roast or chuck steaks, and there's other more specialty cuts that we can get out of this, but today I'm really going to focus on those main two groups of the chuck roast and the chuck steak. And I'm going to go ahead and bring it over to the saw and sort of go ahead and cut it and give y'all an idea of what I'm talking about, and show y'all how to trim get a good quality chuck roast and chuck steak out of it. So first of all, I'm going to start out at 1 inch for the chuck steak. You want to make sure you're good and square. Ahead and get my chuck roast. The only difference between a chuck steak and a chuck roast, a bone-in chuck roast, is the thickness. A standard roast is at least 2 inches thick, so that's what I'm going to keep this to. It's 2 inches thick, and then we'll go. Chuck steak.
So Caleb, the only difference between a chuck roast and a chuck steak is the difference in the cut?
Yes, sir. So you could come in here, and when you're looking at a chuck roast, you have the blade or the shoulder blade of the animal you can see here, and then this is a little bit of the loin, the spinal column and the rib that's left. And what I'm going to do is there's some tendons and stuff in here and a little bit of bone. What I'm going to do is come in here, square that up. You see how there's a gland in here? You don't want that in your roast, so I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to square it up. Most of the time you want to think of it is, well, the roast, most common housewife or whatever is going to have a crock pot or a Magnolite pot. And to me, you want to sort of eyeball it. Will that fit in a good sized pot so they can roast it or put it on the pit or slow cook it? So that's sort of how I like to imagine it. And then with your chuck steak, you want to come in here. You have this big piece of gristle. I want to come in and cut that off, sort of pretty it up, square it up a little bit, and give you a lot better presentable steak that can be cooked down in a gravy, put on the pit.
And this would be called a gravy steak, right?
Yes, sir.
That's a common term.
You could, what I could do here is you can come in here, pull this top bone off like I'm doing right now, and that would be considered a 7 steak or a gravy steak. Okay. It's just how you present it and what you leave on it is really all that defines what it is and what its purpose is in the cooking or in the
So a 7 steak, which is commonly used term, is a chuck steak with less bone?
Less bone and less, so you have the chuck eye, which is this circular portion here. The 7 steak is more worried about that shoulder blade in here.
Okay.
So you're not leaving as much of that chuck in here. If you wanted to do a boneless chuck steak, I would come in here, cut this a little bit thicker, and just leave that chuck eye in there.
Okay.
So you have a nice tender boneless cut.
Okay.
So I think that includes what we're going to do with the chuck primal today and get into the...
Let me ask one question. What do they call a shoulder steak? Some people even use that. So a lot of people use different terms, and sometimes some of the terms won't use in different locations. So a chuck steak, a shoulder steak, things like that sometimes is interchangeable. So a lot of, when people call to get cuts, we try to make sure we understand what they're talking about, because some people might call it one thing and it's another. So what's the shoulder steak?
So a shoulder steak comes off a sort of, it's a connecting portion of where you have this shoulder blade here. Once this shoulder blade ends, it turns into the arm.
Okay.
And that is where it's a little marrow bone inside of it. It sort of looks like a round steak, but it's more oval. And it's more the arm section. They call it this the shoulder.
Okay, so it would be a different primal?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Alright. So now get into the rib loin. And it's pretty simple in name. It's the section of the loin that has the ribs connected to it, and which is majority is the middle of the back or the spine area. So I'm gonna bring it over here and cut a couple steaks. Our customers prefer the grass-fed beef at about 1.5 inches that we have seen. So as I bring this here, and that's what you can leave. I can continue cutting steaks off this, or I can leave it whole and be a good roast to cook whole. Or, so this would be considered a bone-in ribeye. Or I could come in and cut the bone out. Come in, this would be your loin eye of the ribeye, and this is your tail. You come in here, square it up a little bit, make it more presentable, and that would be your boneless, and then your bone-in, and then the loin roast.
Now Caleb, this is one side loin roast on one animal.
Yes, sir.
Right? So this animal is about 1,100 pounds?
Yes, sir.
Live. How many ribeyes could we expect on an 1,100 pound steer cut at 1.5 inches thick?
On this size and this size of loin that would get off here, you'd be probably looking at about 8 to 9 steaks. And that's what it depends on your thickness, depends on the quality of the animal and the size of the animal, like you're saying, to really get a good quality and amount.
Right.
But these here, and that's what y'all done a good job at the ranch, getting these animals ready to be brought to me. And I think any of your customers will be happy to see these on the shelves.
Great, great. So a lot of people, whenever they come to do a lot of custom processing, a lot of their question is how many cuts am I get from the animal? And sometimes they think they're going to get 20 or 30 ribeyes per animal, but that's not completely true, because they only have so many, and if you cut them thicker, then you'd be less. So a lot of times we make sure that we explain to them that, you know, hey, we can process the whole animal for you, but like Caleb said, the quality of the animal that they bring to us and how many steaks they get is all dependent on the weight of the animal and how thick they want them. So it's always a good discussion to talk to Caleb before to let them know what's happening. So good deal. Well, thank you so much, Caleb. And we look forward to doing this probably once a month. We'll break down carcasses and break down primals, and we can start doing all the beef first, and then we might jump into the swine and maybe some lamb after, kind of to show what's going on. So stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in.